start talking.
This is a short family movie that I took in 1947, returning to Algona, Iowa on the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad at 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning. My aunt and uncle, Eva and Howard Smith, met my sister, Betty Strite, and me. We had volunteered to help with the maple syrup. I worked in Chicago and had a new 8mm Revere camera and was anxious to obtain some pictures of the area where I had been raised. This is Smithy with his Irish setter, Danny Boy. We had decided to check the beaver damage on the riverbank south of his farm before we started collecting sap that was really running on this early spring morning. These pictures were taken before the cabin Cozy Grove had been built. Smithy, Wendell, Wen French, and Walter, Dutch Lorenz, realized that there were enough maple trees on Smith's farm that could be tapped. After a couple of years using a motley collection of buckets and pails, Smith wrote to New Hampshire and ordered a dozen buckets. Imagine his shocked surprise when the railroad station called and asked him when he would pick up the carload of buckets. Instead of a dozen buckets, New Hampshire sent a dozen gross. Later he received a letter from New Hampshire inquiring if Iowa was getting into the commercial output of maple syrup. Little did we realize when we were working this day of Betty's going down with a red sweater with Wen French, bringing in the sap as we went out to the area where we had the fire going, passing the old hogs. I don't know if they're still there or not. But there was a lot of work gathering the kindling and the sap, and there were a lot of trees. I never did count them, to keep this maple syrup idea going. These fellows had started the idea and they just loved going out there. This was really a family affair at this time. The cabin was built in the fall of 1949. I was married April 15th, 1950 in the old St. Cecilia's Catholic Church, and we had a wedding breakfast in the old Algona Hotel. This hotel was across the street south of the old courthouse. There was an older hotel that was situated north of the courthouse, and that was burned. They had a big fire there in the late 50s. Smithy's job in Algona was the Kossuth County engineer, and he had his office in the northeast corner of the courthouse. Both the old church and the courthouse have been replaced with new buildings. 35 gallons of sap produced 1 gallon of syrup. Fresh collected sap could be used for washing the hands or the feet, and also could be used as a chaser. Out there working so hard, we didn't have food, but we did have a little refreshment, and we used the sap for a chaser from the bourbon. Flu shots were not available in the 50s. The sap first collected would be poured into this holding tank and then siphoned into the 3-sectional metal vat situated over the fire. Boiling down the sap took approximately 6 to 8 hours, depending on the heat of the fire. This 3-sectional vat worked on the same principle as the channel locks and by gravity. Scumming off the residue was necessary, and it was a time-consuming job, like building the fire here. As I said, we kept building, keeping that fire hot. But it still took a long time to get down there to the area when you would say the syrup was ready. We had a thermometer that did not register the caliber, or it was not registered by degrees. It merely registered syrup. That's Betty in the blue sweater now. She took off the red sweater. I'm in the navy blue here. Everybody was put to work, but when we started, a lot of people didn't come out to help. Oh, that steam is really rolling now. I can't imagine what it's like. I haven't worked over it. I never did get to work when it was in the cabin. That was scumming. There goes my hair. There goes my hairdo. Smith just loved that front oven door. I don't know where he got it. Back from her sap. When I was married in 1950 at the church and a wedding breakfast at the old hotel. And later that evening, the wedding guests all took Kate Delaney to the railroad station. She had come over to my wedding by a cab from Mason City, Iowa. And she also left her handprints and signature on the cabin walls, along with all the other guests from our wedding. But Kate's fingerprints were picked up, and it was recorded in the Fort Dodge Messenger, I believe, that they wondered who she was. Well, she still works in Chicago. She still doesn't drive, so she had to get back to Mason City that evening, and they all took her to the to the railroad station. I'm not used to that, railroad station. And they threw rice at her because she had caught my wedding bouquet. And I often wondered what the passengers on the train thought when she got on, covered with rice, all alone, with my wedding bouquet. You have to keep filling that sap in there because it would boil down and evaporate, and that's what causes all the steam. We didn't have too many bugs or what would you call the moths that were flying in the... Oh, look at that sap. And here comes Smithy, old Honest Abe. You couldn't come down empty-handed. You either had to bring sap down or kindling wood. They were laughing at Betty's hair. She looked so pretty when she got off the railroad station early this morning. I can't figure out if he brought Old Fitzgerald or Jim Beam, but it was bourbon. Honest Abe again. Danny Boy, his setter, didn't come down, Irish setter. He didn't come down here to watch us make the maple syrup. I guess he was in the car. No, I know. Smith had to go back to town. So he took Danny Boy home, and then he came back. And there, it's a good sap. Good syrup. That's no longer sap. That's that finished syrup. See, you can oh, this is Aunt Eva checking out the finished product at her back door on East College Street. This was Aunt Mary's home on Jones Street, and this picture is one of the Sunday dinner it was, and even Smithy are there, and his brother Clayton from Washington, D.C. I wish I had that figure now. This is the home where I was raised by my aunt. Aunt Mary was Eva's sister and my father's sister. And here's Clayton doing the, I can't figure if that's a roast or a turkey. I guess it's a turkey. There's Clayton and Howard and Eva in the center. And that's my father at the Mike Strite. That was used to be Grandpa's position down there. And there I am, and Betty. I don't know who took these pictures. Oh, and here is Smithy. He was the doctor administering his magic potion. And it just goes to show you that good syrup, properly prepared, can overcome any sickness and really, see, he's going to administer it. There's a certain way of doing it. And it goes to show you can get a kick out of life. That's pretty corny. This is the second family gathering that was taken at Christmas time in 1950. Matt and Elvine Strite are here with their young sons, Michael and Charles. Betty and I and my dad, Mike, had driven out from Chicago with my husband, Bill Healy. This is little Charles. He's now a doctor in San Diego area. That's Betty. And I think we were all encouraging Charles to stop eating and stand up and show us his new blue jeans. Blue jeans then weren't as popular as they are at this time. These were just good clothes for active boys and girls. They are. I don't know what they are, though. And here we are leaving Aunt Mary's home with our Christmas loot. And before we drove back to Chicago, we left Aunt Mary's and drove out to see the cabin in the wintertime. And those are the old farm buildings then. And there's old Cozy Grove. And Smithy with one of his Christmas presents. My dad. And there's our Chevrolet convertible, 1950. Came home for the holidays with Aunt Mary.